Hello world, it's been a while. How are you? I'm okay, glad to be alive and healthy above all. As you may know, I began documenting my journey in 2014 with the first video of this series, Chapter 2, Making the Most of 30 and Beyond, where I talked about my experience turning 30 and the thoughts and emotions I had about hitting that milestone. In the second video, Chapter 2.2, Going All In, we rode that beautifully chaotic ride of complete devotion to a dream. Most recently in Chapter 2.3, Stranded in Midair, we rounded the picture out with new explorations and challenges in the workings of it all. As I record this, it's August 2021, and I'm posting this video around the time of my birthday as I typically do, and we are on the tail end of the coronavirus fiasco, or at least we think we are. So here we are, Chapter 2.4, with an especially momentous set of circumstances and emotions. I was born and raised in Southern California. I went to college there, I worked there, my company is based there, but as I speak to you today, I find myself in a quaint two-bedroom apartment in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where life has taken quite a few twists and turns since we last spoke. We'll get to that, but first, let's rewind back to the last time we spoke. It was August 2018. It was the year I went international, working with schools in Canada and Australia. During that year, there were some other things that happened behind the scenes, some quite significant that I didn't discuss in the Chapter 2.3 video. For one thing, I encountered a crippling software issue in late 2017. I'm in touch with thousands of schools and teachers every year, and as one would imagine, computers are a significant factor in managing everything I do. Computers are life-saving devices, and when they are on their game, they are nothing short of miraculous. But when they go down, it can be disastrous. In late 2017, after an exciting and successful year in full-time composition, I encountered this crippling computer issue, and it completely killed my 2017-2018 school year. There's no need to go into details about what all happened because it would take longer to explain than it's worth, and it's not really that interesting at the end of the day. Long story short, my school year was drastically impeded, and when spring 2018 rolled around, I found myself with an unfortunately sparse calendar. Lemons, lemons, lemons all around. So I did what anyone would do in this situation. I fulfilled my obligations with the schools I did have scheduled, and then I packed my bags and moved to Southeast Asia for a month. Yes, I did that. And I have to admit, it was some of the best lemonade I've ever tasted. I loved visiting Thailand, the cities, the islands, the cultural centers. I visited Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and also Singapore. Definitely a lifetime trip that had its own special place in time. You can always travel, but a trip is inextricably bound to your time and place in life. A childhood family trip has a special charm that only exists at that phase. A retirement cruise is unique to that phase. A solo backpacking trip through Southeast Asia as a young single guy was something that fit then and there and only then and there. During that trip, I also worked on a commission for the fun and classy students at Vincent Massey High School in Manitoba, Canada, where I was shamed for never having seen Harry Potter or Star Wars. The piece I wrote for them was called Love the Adventure, and it's all about the twists and turns that life throws at you and learning that the best option we have is simply to learn to love the adventure, up or down, rain or shine. You can't always change your circumstances, but you can change the way you play the game, and I loved the adventure of my Southeast Asian extravaganza. I didn't include this little interlude in my 2018 video because, like many things, you don't always recognize their significance in the moment. But a little time can bring a lot of perspective, and I thought I would mention it now because the lesson behind it was so powerful and so apt for today. Like so many things in life, the alternative turned out to be better than the original plan. There was a second thing also that I didn't mention during my Chapter 2.3 video as well. When I travel, I usually travel solo because who can pack up and spend 2 months driving around the US for all the random tours that I do? When I do travel, though, I generally make a point of meeting and talking to people in the places that I go. In 2018, I visited Canada, and I met this girl, Tina. We spent just one February day talking and laughing and all that stuff, and then we bade farewell and continued along our separate paths. 5 months later, as I landed at LAX after my Australia tour in August, I turned on my cell phone while the plane maneuvered through the tarmac, and lo and behold, there was a text message from her. She randomly messaged that she was in LA on a girls' trip, and she asked if I had some time to hang out again, and I did. For most of my life, I haven't really been much about love and relationships and all that, but life holds its own surprises, and things changed that fall, and quite quickly. In September and October, I flew up to Canada to visit her. In November, she flew down to visit me and my family for Thanksgiving. In January, I proposed. In June, we were married. It's funny how life works. All this came out of left field, but hey, what are you going to do? Now, before we go further, you may recall that my most recent video, Chapter 2.3, is titled Stranded in Mid-Air. I titled it as such because 2018 was somewhat of a peerless year for me professionally due to that techno disaster we discussed, and it left me in a tenuous place, scrambling to recover. In 2019, I was all set for that recovery for the 2019-2020 school year. I fixed my issues and my spring calendar was full and things were looking up. My first tour of 2020 was epic. My new wife joined me for the first few weeks of it. I rented a car in Chicago and then we drove down to Missouri, then to Kansas, then back to Missouri, then Oklahoma, then down through Arkansas into Louisiana, and then across to Mississippi where I had to drop my wife off at Jackson Airport to fly back up to Canada for work. And then I continued on to Alabama, then Florida, then up to Georgia through South Carolina, North Carolina, West Virginia, then New Jersey, New Hampshire, Connecticut, then over to Pennsylvania and Ohio. It was in Ohio that the first news reports manifested. I remember sitting in a Mexican restaurant watching this bizarre little story unfold. Then I got in my car and continued north. I went to New York, then further north up to Toronto, and I visited Niagara Falls from the Canadian side this time, then over to Michigan. In Michigan, the world changed forever. One day, I was eating at a local restaurant in Lansing with a new friend I'd met in town. The next day, everything was closed. Shortly thereafter, I was returning my rental car and I was on a plane back to California. Every week, a new state canceled in-person classes for the rest of the school year, and soon the year was a wrap. My recovery year exploded before my eyes. The year got even crazier when my passport expired. Remember, my wife was in Canada. I was in the U.S. Passport is needed to go to Canada. Passport was expired. U.S. passport office closed down. Wife in Canada, and Daryl stuck in California for 4 months before finally getting a new passport that July. That was a drag, but that was 2020. Now, when you're an independent contractor in a situation like a pandemic, you get this sensation that everyone scatters to do their own thing and put out their own fires, and you're kind of just left adrift. There were a handful of teachers who rushed in to do what they could to support, and I'm endlessly grateful for their care, love, and generosity. And so I want to make sure I acknowledge some of the goodness I received that spring. Those teachers have a special place in my heart for life. But by and large, I found myself in a situation where everything was canceled for the foreseeable future, and frankly, my entire business model was decimated. For a few months, I really couldn't write music or do anything of substance. It was a deflating time for me. Even replying to emails took way too much out of me. Eventually, I picked myself up and started writing again. Fortunately, I had 4 commissions in my queue to finish, and those deadlines really gave me a tremendous sense of purpose and motivation, as did working with the teachers and students involved. Once I overcame the sluggishness and hopelessness of it all, my COVID year became a period of renaissance growth and experimentation. I completed those 4 commissions. Then I flexed some of my writing muscles and decided to work on some literary projects. The first of which is called If Ever You Think of Me. It's a middle grade short story fantasy based on one of the commissioned pieces of that same name. I've published dozens of concert music works by now, and I've got that process down packed. However, publishing literature was a new process, and I enjoyed learning all about it. If Ever You Think of Me is now available on Amazon as an ebook and on iTunes and Audible as an audiobook. I am now an author. After that, I decided to go big, and by my birthday this year, I finished my first full-length novel. It'll take some time to get that one published, but I was thrilled to have it and be able to complete an entire actual novel, and I hope it'll be out by next year or early 2023. Another new realm I explored was a podcast. Everyone's doing it, right? So I decided to throw my hat in the ring and begin work on an artistic podcast called Design the Experience, where I deal with the substance of life design and personal architecture via original stories and music. Look out soon for its debut. Also, the last few years, I'd accumulated a backlog of mostly finished music for band, orchestra, and jazz band that I hadn't had the time to complete for publication. This summer, I worked through a whopping 16 of those works. And finally, for something completely different, I began a special project. Like many who stayed shut in for so much of the last year and a half, my wife and I emerged with a baby bump. Both of us, actually, but hers is more important. So it was a wonky year, but it was at least productive. So you don't need me to tell you that COVID has changed the world forever. But fortunately and unfortunately, it has changed many of us as individuals as well, especially those of us whose lives were most disrupted. COVID has paved the way for an increase in remote collaboration. In the short term, it has made work and socializing cheaper and easier. In the long term, I believe it will increase the chasm between friends, family, coworkers, and neighbors. Many of us struggle with isolation and loneliness already. And not to use a buzzword, but I do worry about our mental and emotional health as a society as we make this digital transition. COVID has changed our economy. We haven't felt it yet, but I expect that there will be a delayed wave of economic turmoil coming soon, and only the well-prepared and the clever will be able to surf that wave. I could go on, but the point is, we've made it through, but there's a different world on the other side of this tunnel. For me personally, I've had a lot of time to think about my career, my purpose, and my future. And I would be lying if I said that this all hasn't changed my outlook on all these things. It dampened my shine, it muddied my hope, and shifted my focus. I felt my priorities morphing in real time. My career model is firmly based on live and person interactions. It just may be that this will be untenable given the direction many school districts are taking. This has all led to a personal anxiety that I'm going to open up and share with you. As an artist, especially as an artist that practices in the obscure arts, of which I'd include band and orchestra composition, there's a continuous fight for legitimacy in your own eyes and in the eyes of others. There's always that faint chant, get a real job. People say it in their different ways, some more subtle, some less, but it's something that you're going to hear when things take a hard turn for you. Society has its own ways of measuring success and the value of a person's effort, and it's not hard to be influenced by it. I began my career in music composition in 2010 with the publication of my first work, Waltz and Chaconne for Wind Band. At that point, my career was nothing but a dream. Each year, I published more and participated with more and more concerts and ensembles with a wider and wider geographic radius. And all throughout a career like this, the question plagues you, maybe not explicitly, but certainly, am I successful? Have I made it? Am I a composer yet? Society will answer these questions based on the size of your pocketbook, and I will be honest with you and say that though I've made it through and been able to stay alive, I haven't hit any kind of jackpot. Frankly, I wonder how many band and orchestra composers do hit jackpots. And what does that mean? If I died today, did I fail? Did I fail because I'm not rich, powerful, or famous? As I said, very few people get wealthy in band and orchestra composition, or powerful or famous for that matter, though there's always someone to compare yourself to, and as I've ascended each year with more and more exciting leaps and bounds, COVID has been a brick wall that has crushed my momentum. And as that wall slowly crumbles after 18 months, the world on the other side is a world that, at first glance, appears hostile, maybe even barren. It's a world where bands and orchestras are still widely prohibited from traditional performance practices. It's a world where music programs are being cut and restricted as administrators desperately theorize about how to recover from the academic devastation of 2 years of compromised education. That's a tough reality, and I can't deny that many students have truly suffered greatly, and likely irreparably in many cases. It's a world where school funding is strained and traditional performance is suspended or severely modified. A world where teachers are uneasy, hesitant, and on edge about whatever new policies await them as each month passes. I do know teachers that have retired just because it just got way too much. So after 10 plus years of building my career on a foundation that may very well be a foundation of sinking sand, I face those anxieties. Did I fail? Do I give up now? Am I one more empty Los Angeles dream? I'm aware that this is the time where I stand up and throw my fist into the air and yell, "No, I shall persist, never give up." But I'm not going to do that, not because it's not a good attitude to have, but because it's not authentic at this place and time. I honestly don't know what all this means for myself or any other composer. I do believe that there's always a way to get where you're trying to go. I just don't know where I want to go anymore. I wonder, did I do what I came to do? Is my desired destination still what I always thought it was? Here's what has given me the greatest peace. It's a quote by Earl Nightingale where he defines success as the progressive realization of a worthwhile goal. The progressive realization of a worthwhile goal. That is his definition of success. And it holds that your personal value and the measure of your success has no relation to the money, fame, or power it may or may not yield. As long as you are progressively working toward a worthwhile goal, you have made yourself successful. In the first video of this series, I said, in my teens, I gazed at the stars. In my 20s, I reached for the stars. In my 30s, I will touch the stars and embrace the purpose that has been set aside for me. And in the midst of my struggle, fear, anxiety, and reflection, I was able to zoom out and see my life in ways I hadn't before. Each year, I go away on a personal retreat at some hotel or Airbnb or campsite, and I assess the last year and plan for the next year. I also review goals and consider my life. One of the questions I ask myself is, what would I do differently if I knew I would die in 10 years? And this year, I realized I wouldn't do anything differently. I asked myself how I would feel about my legacy if I died today. And similarly, I felt entirely at peace with that as well. In fact, there was nothing about my life or career or history that I regret at all. I have loved this life completely and totally. And even if I won the lottery tomorrow, it wouldn't change anything I do now. If I won $500 million, I would wake up tomorrow and write music. Next spring, I would visit all the schools and bands and orchestras I could fit in. I would continue my podcast and write more books. My life, my work, and everything I do is so authentic to me and who I am that I could die in peace today with what I've done, and I would happily continue with this work whether or not I needed the money. I get so caught up in day-to-day details and actions of life, but during that 2021 summit earlier this year, I took a moment to stop and reflect, and I saw it all. I see it all now. So far, I've composed and published some 40 concert works. I wrote my first book. I worked with thousands of band and orchestra students. I got to visit all 50 states. I got to take my music international and travel internationally. I exposited via my YouTube channel and now my podcast. All progressive realizations toward worthwhile goals. I haven't had to work outside of my field since freshman year of college when I worked in the university cafeteria. Good times. In the end, I realized I did walk on the stars. I was me to the max, and I loved every minute of it. And it was this journey that led me to finding my wife and now my soon-to-be child. If I could go back to high school me and tell him all that was to come, it would be nothing but sheer, unimaginable shock and joy, because how many people get to become professional composers? There are no established statistics on that, but I estimate that it would be in the realm of 0.0001%, or about 1 in 10,000. If you're an average person, I wouldn't be surprised if you've never even met one, or if you never do. I know I hadn't until I went to music school. But I wanted to be a composer. I didn't realize it while it was happening over the last decade, but I did what I set out to do. And I would do it 1,000 times again over anything else I could have done that would have netted me a giant salary or power or fame. Composition was a needle in the haystack, but I found it. This was a life authentic to me, and I really do feel like I produced what I was put here to produce. I'm only 37, and I feel like the world is still ahead of me, but at the same time has flown. I can't believe I've been writing music for 25 years. That's crazy. 25 years. And to think it all began like this. And please don't hold that against me. We all got to start somewhere. It's also trippy to imagine that I'm 13 years away from 50. So this is the fourth installment in my little journey, and unless there appears to be a significant reason to do so, I don't think I'll update this again until the big 40. I have 3 years to mentally prepare for that one, but as I do, I find myself in a much better mental space than I did when I was turning 30. At 30, I had a box of pieces, and I really didn't understand how they fit together. Today, I have vision. Today, I have the culmination of so many of my hopes and dreams. So I don't feel so anxious about 40 because I rest well knowing that I've done my best and that I've been making progressive strides toward worthwhile goals, and if I died today, it would be all gratitude. So what happens now? COVID is almost over, or it's at least as over as it will likely be for quite a while. What does that mean? What do you think it will mean for you? For me, I'm taking with me the reality that I will have to be open to unpredictable futures. When we meet again here in 3 years, I am prepared for the real possibility that I'll be showing you a very different life, and I am working ever so diligently inside and out to open my heart and mind to whatever result awaits me. Professionally, I've made it through a year of this, but I couldn't make it through a second year without some significant changes. So what happens in 2022 will largely determine the course of my life from there on out. In 2024, when I turn 40, I will celebrate my goals and whatever I'm able to accomplish to round out the decade of my 30s, and I will thank God for them. Then, I will put those goals away and draft a new vision for a new decade. As I mentioned before, COVID has changed me as a person. Maybe it's time to reinvent. Maybe it's time to say goodbye to things that I've treasured for so long. But I will promise you that I won't stop fighting for the truth of who I am and for my core purposes. But whatever happens, it is well with my soul because I am blessed. I have been blessed. And it's a beautiful life. Keep me in your prayers, and I'll see you again soon.